Hello everybody and welcome back to a brand new video from me, Pickles Park Reviews. Now Doctor Who Series 13 is only a few days away and I'm going to be honest, it's sort of crept up on me quite a bit. We hadn't really had any news about Series 13 until the past couple of weeks, in which we've had a bombardment of news, and I've been quite busy these past couple of weeks with school, with work, with general things, and therefore I haven't really absorbed all of the news in a normal way as I would have done usually. That's why I didn't cover the trailer, because ultimately I was out at the time it was released and I was just so busy with schoolwork and actual work that ultimately I didn't really have time to cover it. So ultimately I thought I'd just talk about all my thoughts around the Doctor Who Series 13 in this video as we head in to Sunday, in which the first episode of the new series will air on BBC One. But yeah, so Doctor Who Series 13, or should I say Doctor Who Flux. I realise I never actually spoke about the fact that it's not Series 13 anymore, it's Flux. This series of Doctor Who has a subheading for some reason, and I'm gonna be real, I have mixed feelings on it. The conformist in me just likes having Series 13, Series 10, Series 5. I like having it all the same, and to have two series in an era be series, and then the final one in an era just have a subheading for some reason, I'm gonna be real, sort of irritates me. And I do like it all being uniformed, and I would have liked it just to be called Series 13, although I understand why they're doing it. They're trying to make Doctor Who appear more accessible, and calling it Flux rather than Series 13 sort of achieves that. Now, in terms of Flux itself, it's okay. It does seem a bit generic, and it sort of goes into the schooling of Chris Chibnall weird alien planet and events thing, where he always chooses really just bizarre but also kind of just general and quite dull planet names. Like, they're so sort of out there but also just not really out there enough, if you sort of understand what I mean. Like, all of his stuff, like they just almost seem a bit dull, but also out there at the same time. I don't really know how to explain it, but this sort of is a pattern of Chris Chibnall naming alien stuff, and Flux sort of fits the bill. I get what they were going for. It's short, it's snappy, but it doesn't really tell you anything, and Flux, it just feels a bit generic, if that makes sense. It doesn't really tell you anything, it's just Doctor Who Flux, but I do understand what they were going for. They wanted the short and snappy one-word thing, so it tells you that this is sort of a new thing, but it also doesn't confuse the audience. If it was Doctor Who, Ordeal of the Sontarans or something, you know, that wouldn't quite work for a general audience. So I understand why they went short and snappy. Flux, I guess we'll have to wait and see. What is the Flux? Is it an event? Is it a race? Is it a person? Who knows? I'd be interested to see, but Flux, it doesn't sound all too threatening, so my guess it's going to be something to do with time. Flux sounds very sort of as if it's going to be about time or intertwined with some tiny stuff, some tiny shenanigans, so I imagine it is going to be all interlinked with that. And thinking about that now, I do quite like Flux on the basis that it's going to be something with time, because I am a big fan of stories that play with time. It's probably why I enjoyed the Moffat era so much, or I guess why I have this taste in Doctor Who that I really like stories that play with time, and just media in general, is probably because I was brought up on that Matt Smith era, which very much always was playing with time, which some people don't like, but because that was my first exposure to Doctor Who, it's therefore informed my preference for media. I just enjoy when stories play with time and do some weird stuff with it, and I suppose by the naming of Flux, if you were to look into that word, then that sort of implies that there will be something messing about with time, which, if that is what Flux is, then I'm very much happy with it. But as a word, it feels sort of generic, but it's also harmless. You know, I would prefer it to be Series 13, but I kind of get what they're going for. They're presenting this more of a sort of mini-series, as a closed-off arc in which all stories will feed into one another. It feels very much more like a Netflix series than it does a series of Doctor Who, like a standard series. And I'm going to delve into my thoughts a bit more as to whether I think that that as disingenuous to what the product actually seems as if it's going to be, or if that's actually quite representative of what we seem to be getting. Going on to the trailer then, because it's announced Doctor Who FLUX rather than Series 13, as we've been led to believe, and then we got the trailer, which was very much a lot more informative than the previous trailer, which actually covered that aired in July. This one showed us what we really wanted to see in the first trailer: monsters. We got Sontarans, we got Weeping Angels, both of which we sort of knew was going to appear. Then we also got the Ood as well, and we also got Cybermen, as well as some weird skull looking people, which do look quite cool, and a weird dog person, which doesn't look that cool. But yeah, we got monsters. We knew the Sontarans and the Weeping Angels were going to appear. Sontarans, when I spoke about the set photos of their new garb, their new redesign, I was very complimentary towards them. I thought they looked great. I really liked the samurai-esque inspiration, returning to that black and silver as well. I thought they looked great. However, looking at it in motion, I am less sold on it. I think that looking it up close, the sort of samurai-esque design almost makes it look quite bulky when you intertwine that with the neck ring. It almost looks too bulky, maybe too much going on. And we've seen what's underneath the helmet now, and the head shape, the mask, isn't that convincing. Some people have said it looked great, some people have said it looks terrible. For me, I'm more on the fact that it doesn't look that good. I know people say that it's almost harking back to the Lynx face sculpt, and the thing is that Lynx face sculpt looks incredible for 1974 or whenever it was. When you put that in the 21st century, in 2021, it doesn't quite hold up. I think the thing is, with the accentuated features, the angular cheekbones, it almost looks more paper mache. It looks more fake compared to the RTD ones, which they went for a more organic approach. The skin almost felt a bit slimy, and to me that felt more real. Whereas this, it looks quite rough, it looks quite almost quite dry, like it almost feels as if it's a paper mache thing, as I said before, and to me it looks less convincing. I like the fact they've gone more to the darker brown, harking back to Lynx and the Time Warrior, but ultimately it looks less convincing, although I think I'll have to wait until it's properly in motion. Although some of the set photos we've seen after there's some of the release photos, it does look less and less convincing the more you see about it, although I'm ready to reserve judgment because I did like the initial design in the leaked set photos, so I'm going to hold judgment until we see them in action. We also saw Weeping Angels, which I'm very excited to see the Weeping Angels back. I think that they've been away for quite a while now, and I really hope that Chibnall has a very interesting story to tell. I've always wanted to have a Weeping Angel story set in the snow. I know we sort of got that with Time of the Doctor, but not really, because it was like a 2-minute scene. I want to see a proper Weeping Angel in the snow, a cold, wintry story. And although we probably aren't going to be getting that, if we get something along those lines, that'd be great. I want to see Weeping Angels snatching people from the street. That seems to be what we are getting, and I'd really want them to come back and be a threat, because I feel like the Chibnall era monsters really have lacked some fear factor. Even though I'm not going to be scared of the Weeping Angels because I'm 17 now, ultimately you can still tell if something's scary even if it doesn't scare you yourself. So I really feel like I want that fear factor to come back and make the show feel scary again, because I almost feel as if the show, in terms of scares, had almost come across as self-parodying at points in the Jodie era. So I want a foe like the Weeping Angels to come back and bring the fear factor, because not only when the show has attempted to be scary, it sort of fell flat on its face, but also most of the villains, they've sort of turned into almost punchlines. Tim Shaw, Ashad, people like that. Ultimately, I feel like I'd really like some villain to be seriously a threat. We're obviously getting the Ood and Cybermen as well, which is interesting. I'm happy to see the Ood back, although I have a feeling they won't really have a story dedicated to themselves. They just sort of be a recognisable presence in one of the parts, which, makes sense. The Cybermen as well, interesting. I didn't expect them to come back in this series, I'm going to be real. Although there are some theories that we may be returning to old Gallifrey or new Gallifrey, whatever, and the Cybermen will be there. Yeah, I'm excited to see the Cybermen again, although I'd really like the focus to be on them. And my worry with this story and how it seems to be setting up, they're not going to be the focal point of a story. They'll either be a quick cameo, or they'll be in the background again, if you know what I mean. When I really want these Cybermen to be the focus of their own story, because we didn't really get that in the Series 12 finale. But ultimately, I'm glad to see more returning monsters. I feel like the Chibnall era, and even the Capaldi era to a certain extent, and I suppose the Smith era as well, but I think because they made so many returning monsters in the Smith era, out of original creations, it felt less that they didn't have a returning villains, if that makes sense. But I am glad to see some returning villains, because I feel that the Chibnall era and the Capaldi era really lacked a presence of returning villains, other than the big three, Dalek, Cyberman, Master. You know, I really want to see more villains returning, and I'm glad that we're seeing that. I feel like having returning villains is so important, and we haven't really had that since the Rusty Davis era. The Smith era also, but those were more original creations like the Silence, who did return, which was great. I love the fact that the Smith era made new villains and actually tried to make them into bigger and credible threats to be part of a rogues gallery rather than a one-off and relying on the same old villains. But ultimately we haven't had that big roster of returning villains, so I'm glad that we're getting it in this trailer. The series as a whole does come across to me as perhaps polarizing as to what it actually is. Marketing it as Doctor Who Flux and having the episodes be called chapters, and having it always marketed as one big story that's all interconnected surrounding this event of the Flux, it makes it seem as if it's more of a Netflix series, something that is one continuous story told over multiple episodes. I came to the realization the other day that ultimately, continuous narrative TV shows very much feel like books. If that makes sense, they very much feel like each episode is a chapter with surrounding an arc going over several episodes. And that's what most TV shows are, particularly those made by Netflix. And that's clearly what Doctor Who and the BBC as a whole is trying to aspire to. If anyone's seen the BBC's latest rebrand and their rebrand of iPlayer, you know that they're very much trying to liken themselves to Netflix. So yes, that appears to be what they're going with this, but judging by the trailer and the synopses of the episodes, it very much seems like this is more of your typical Doctor Who story arc. Well, not your typical one, but when Doctor Who has tried to do stories in terms of, oh yeah, this series is one big story, it very much hasn't really been that. It's very much still been distinct episodes, just with maybe a reference to an arc in each episode. The biggest example of this is Season 16, The Key to Time, in which each episode is very much a standalone episode, but just the Doctor and Romana need to find a piece of the key to time, a segment of the key, and it's dotted around in each story, but each story is very much its own thing, and that's sort of the vibe I get from this, even down to the subtitle, The Key to Time and Flux. It very much appears to me that the Doctor and co are going to be in different settings and generally self-contained stories that just sort of have one small thing to do with the Flux. Maybe they're investigating the Flux and it brings them to these different places, but ultimately they still need to sort out these very much self-contained plots. Or maybe each story is still surrounding the Flux and the Flux's effect on different places and times and monsters, but you know, it's still very much distinct places and foes, rather than just one episode literally goes into another in which we're stuck in a similar place for every episode. So it still very much seems to me like Doctor Who as it usually is, rather than this is one contained story. It very much seems to me like, yeah, it might be one story told over 6 episodes, but you'll still be able to take each episode as their own thing, just like in any other series of Doctor Who. In terms of what I think about this, I don't know. I do quite like my bubble episodes of Doctor Who, my self-contained filler episodes that really are diamonds in the rough with a great concept from a great writer. I very much do like those, and it almost seems as if we're not going to get those now, which is a bit of a shame. When you're dedicating every story to being a jigsaw piece in a wide arc, you really need to be sold on that arc, and I'm a bit worried that it's Chibnall writing it, so I may not. I thought his handling of the Timeless Child arc and that implementation throughout the series really wasn't all that great. So ultimately I'm a bit wary. I'm very wary that Chris Chibnall is writing every single episode of this. You guys know that I'm not the biggest fan of his writing style, and ultimately I think the best episodes of his era have been from guest writers, not him himself. I think he's particularly weak, and I haven't been amazingly impressed at him writing returning villains. Contrary to other people, I haven't really been impressed with his writing of the Dalek Cybermen Master. So ultimately I'm a bit apprehensive of him writing all of this. I think it could either be really good, give Chris Chibnall an idea, a storyline to follow through like his other series like Broadchurch. Give him some established characters like his writing for Life on Mars, which is really good for the record, and he could come up with wonders, or it could just become really boring, self-indulgent, bland 6 episodes that really don't really come together. You know, it's a bit of a toss-up, and I'm quite wary of that and disappointed that that is a thing. But ultimately, we've just got to hold out hope. I am also worried with the amount of returning villains in that. It almost feels like it's not really Flux, it's just loads of monsters and ideas just chucked at the screen and seeing what sticks. And that's a bit of a worry. It might just come across as a jumble of different things that Chris Chibnall's just decided to shoehorn in there without a very clear story or satisfying actual aim for the story to tell. It might just appear as, oh yeah, Flux is an excuse to just shove loads of these recognisable things at the screen. That is a bit of a worry as well. But I think the thing is with this 6 episodes ongoing arc stretched through and told in this, the Flux, is it could be really good, but it also could be quite bad. I'm very apprehensive of Chibnall writing this. I am quite worried about that it might just be loads of these elements just chucked at the screen. But ultimately, I think this idea has the potential to be really quite excellent. I think it's just a case of whether it will be or not. And I am apprehensive, but I'm apprehensive going into any series of Doctor Who these days. I'm just a pessimist in general, in life, not just Doctor Who. So, yeah, we'll have to wait and see. One thing I do want the Flux to be about is that I want the very, just big and just out there ideas to return to Doctor Who. The stuff I liked about the Moffat era is he had these great, crazy, out-of-the-box ideas for his stories that were just a sight to behold. Some of them didn't quite come off, but I like the fact that he had these amazing and just brilliant, mind-boggling ideas for some of his stories. His best creations all come from that. My issue with the Chibnall era is most of his ideas all feel very generic. They all feel pretty samey and bog standard. You don't get that quite inspiration and, you know, that just interestingness in his story that you get with Moffat. And what I really like is for Flux, for Chris Chibnall, to just go really out there, for him to just explore loads of really cool ideas. I think someone said about Loki, I think it was Full Fat Videos, that explores some really interesting concepts that Chris Chibnall's Doctor Who just doesn't even bother with. And I really want the interesting and out there concepts to return to Doctor Who. I want this story to be really interesting and not just a very bland and bog standard story that wastes 6 episodes. And my final thing which I really want to talk about is the characters. The Doctor, Yaz, and new companion Dan, played by John Bishop. And one thing I really want for this series, and I'm a bit worried it won't do because it's such a short episode runtime, it almost feels like it might be running at a breakneck pace, is I want some depth for these characters. I think one of the things that make you love an era of Doctor Who is the characters and you care about them. It's one of the aspects of the Matt Smith era of Doctor Who. The stories sometimes aren't the best, but I'm always very invested in the characters, that I don't really care. And I think one of the reasons I'm so numb towards this era of Doctor Who is I don't care about any of the characters. The stories you don't know about before going into a series of Doctor Who, but you do know that you're going to have these same characters, and I really want to feel something towards them. I want these characters to be challenged. I want Yaz to get more of a personality, to be challenged, to be put through the ringer. I want Jodie Whittaker's Doctor to really be challenged, to be backed into a corner, to make some tough calls, to show a darker side. And I really want Dan to just be interesting. We saw a preview clip which was quite funny. I know people say it doesn't really tell us much about Dan, but I think it's just quite a funny scene which almost lends itself to the groundedness of Dan's character. I really want him to be that relatable funny man, and it looks like we're going to be getting that. And I also really want that group to gel. I have a feeling 3 companions will be the gem. I have a feeling these 3 will really gel, and I hope that they will anyway to create a really good TARDIS trio. But yeah, I really want this this story to really push the characters. If this story is some universe bending and some big stake story like it's being hyped up to be, it really needs to leave an impact on the characters and really put them in positions in which we've never seen them before. That is a must, and I feel as if it's something this era has been sorely missing, and something that I really hope Flux brings us. So yes, overall, I'm kind of in terms of Flux. I am excited to get more Doctor Who. I haven't been all too engaged within this new era of Doctor Who in terms of the news we've been getting for this new series. I was around January, February time, and since then I've been a bit lukewarm towards it. I've just kind of gone off Doctor Who. I dip in and out when it comes to Doctor Who. I go through different phases, and right now I've kind of not really been in a Doctor Who phase, so I haven't really been getting all too hyped, but discussing this, I think I am hyped. I just really want this to be good, and you know, I am apprehensive. I always am when it comes to Chibnall 2, but yeah, I hope that some of these ideas really do come off. I am always not really hyped, it seems, going into a series of Chibnall. I mean, I wasn't ready for Series 11, I was quite hyped for that, but Series 12 I wasn't hyped at all, and then the minute the first episode ended, that hype came back to me, so I'm really hoping that's the case with this series. And yeah, I am apprehensive, but I'm hoping that this series really fulfills its potential, because it has the potential to be great, and I really hope it is that. But yes, thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, drop a sub, and hit that notification bell to stay notified for all my latest videos. What do you think? You hyped for Flux? Are you not? Whatever you think, drop your thoughts in the comment section below. I'd be really interested to read your thoughts. But yes, thank you guys for watching, and of course, a goodbye.